Well, I think Sonny said the national health plan, not socialized medicine.
Well, that was scares me. I mean, we are at the Chamber of Commerce, by the way, so that does scare me.
The proper term is national health.
But I was just being careful.
Well, you did well.
Don, you're going to say something.
Socialized medicine works, quite frankly. I've seen it work, or, well.
We can look at the federal government. I don't think they are providing the model for fiscal responsibility in how they're handling Medicare and Social Security.
Or anything else.
Or anything else. And quite frankly, the new GASB accounting standards have forced cities like Duluth to come to terms with the benefits that we're offering and what is the reality of providing those benefits into the future. And the actuarial plan, is a somewhat accurate portrayal or anticipation of what those future liabilities are. But I have to tell you, if anything, it's probably a lower number than it should be. Because if you look at the actuarial numbers, when you get 7-8 years out, it flattens out to about 5% medflation. A 5% medflation from year 8 until year 30. And if we can anticipate a 5% medflation, we're going to be doing really well. What happens to that number if it's a more realistic number that we've seen in the recent past of 8, 10, 15% medflation in those years? And if we don't take the bull by the horns right now and make reasonable concessions, we will simply not be able to catch up in 5 or 10 years.
Interesting. Well, go ahead.
Well, you're both right, because you're forced to deal with intangible numbers. So what's the number? And how much have we funded up to this point in time? How much do we have set aside? And setting
It's
up
a
the
big number.
but setting up the irrevocable trust was a good job. Got it done. But we got to put money in it.
Well, we are putting money into it.
I do still want to hear what type of return, what type of investments we're exposing that irrevocable trust to. Because I'm in the financial industry. You don't get double the return just by putting it someplace else without taking some type of risk with that money. Bonds pay what bonds pay. Equities pay what equities pay, and what risk are we exposing our money to get this anticipated 8 or 10 or 12%? And those are the numbers that I'd like to see in here.
Let me talk about good government stuff, because one of the things that's happening right now is in 2007 we're projected to put $920,000 into that fund through the water and gas fund. So we've raised our utility rates. What we're hearing from a couple of companies now is that are water dependent. Oh, this is killing me. And this in the face of some blistering competition. So as we start raising some of these rates to get money into that account, again, we're going to affect some of the business climate. So what is the best way to start attacking some of these numbers? Is it through taxation? Is it through utility rates that are maybe a little too high?
Well, it's dealing with the expense side of it first. And
Okay.
it's based on the recommendations that came forth from the task force. And there was no reason that almost 2 years ago when they said move to a fully insured plan for the post-64-year-olds. It's almost been 2 years and we haven't done that. We have not bid out the management, which would have cut those costs in half, and we have not gone to a generic plan at all on how to do that and dispense that. So it's a manner of taking action, moving on it. Recommendations have been on the table, and we have to start looking at really what amount of money we really have to fund, because those savings itself will bring that 300 down considerably, and so it lowers the amount that we have to provide for the cash flow. We need to fund the cash flow of the plan.
Quickly on that point, you can't go out to bid for retiree plans when we're trying to manage and administer over 120 different plans, because each retiree has a different plan that they're retiring under. And that's why it's so important that we get the contracts done and try to get everyone on one plan so that we can go out and get competitive bids from different companies, and that's when our costs will lower. We have gone out to bid on our supplemental, and nobody will bid on it. Blue Cross Blue Shield is the only one who has the system, because they've grown with our benefit that they are able to manage it. No other provider is going to come in and take on administering 120 to 150 different plans.
Okay,
but we could put in some auditors in-house, and we haven't done that.
But in the face of this, because this election is becoming about is retiree health care, but in the face of that, we have a lot of other issues. We have to fund government that's already here. And what I'm afraid of is that we'll see a lot of tax increases, whether they're direct or indirect. So how do we manage the whole thing going forward while trying to solve a problem? Jim, you've got the solution because you're raising your hand.
Well, I just want to go back because I thought that was the question you asked before, wasn't it? What's going to affect with utility rate increases and what can we do to handle that? A little bit of side.
Talk about that, yeah.
Well, you know, we're blessed with the third cheapest electric utility in the country.
That's true.
And there's a wonderful model there with what we have with Elite and Minnesota Power. We own the water and gas department. We control that. I think the reality is, and people don't want to hear it, and I'm not afraid to say it, we're going to be looking at increased taxes to help solve the retiree health care problem. Part of that has to come from continued revenues coming from water and gas utilities. It's that simple. I think it's hard on the local businesses that are heavily dependent on water, that are heavily dependent on gas. And if we have an inequity in that system somewhere, and it's an economic development issue, I think the city needs to be prepared to work with certain end users if they're bracketed at the high use rate.
And we have done it in the past. We did it with Stora Enso.
Yeah.
And the utility, we hear a lot about how people can't afford the utilities, but what's going up for the gas is the gas. The portion that goes up to fund the not set aside monies that we should have set aside for the retirees is infinitesimal compared to what other parts of that are. Water going forward is going to be our hugest, most important resource. We will have fresh water and clean water when other people do not have fresh water and clean water. And if we don't continue to invest in our infrastructure and pay the costs of that water utility, and perhaps look at a higher pilot, a higher payment in lieu of taxes, as a money-making entity for the community, we are, I think, are short-sighted.
But isn't that just a tax if you raise it up to cover other things?
It is an enterprise that is owned by the people. The people deserve a return on that enterprise.
Okay.
Do you know how long it takes for water coming in our pumping station to get out to Fond du Lac? I had a tour a couple of weeks ago. It takes 5 days.
Good.